Hello, and welcome to Amplifying the Voices of African Researchers, a podcast series by the Climate and Development Knowledge Network Africa, where we spotlight emerging science evidence, highlight local knowledge, and amplify African-led research shaping climate action across the continent. This early career fellowship is supported by the International Development Research Center and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands. Thanks for making our podcast part of your routine. I'm your host, Herein, and in each episode, we sit down with experts, especially early career researchers, who are shaping Africa's climate future through groundbreaking and policy-relevant research. Hello, everyone. Today we are delving to the southern part of Africa, and I have with me a very phenomenal researcher who has a lot to tell us today. Blessing, tell a little bit about yourself.
Thank you for having me today. It is a pleasure to be on the Climate and Development Knowledge Network Fellows in 2025. My name is Dr. Blessing Charuka. I'm a coastal management researcher. Currently based at the University of at Rhodes University in South Africa. My research focuses on climate impacts on costs, particularly adaptation to climate to coastal erosion. So I'm also a fellow with the Future Earth Coast and a member of the Coastal Resource Management in South Africa as well. Today I'm going to present to you one of my research which I've conducted, which is focused on the challenges and lessons learned from global coastal erosion management strategies.
Before, that's very interesting. I love your background. But before we go into your research, could you tell us a little bit about why you got into this particular space?
So as I've said, I'm a coastal management specialist. I have a research background in maritime affairs, maritime transport, and I had undergraduate studies in marine science. And as we know that climate change has had a lot of impacts in terms of impacts on coastal areas. So I thought if I'm focus my research more on coastal management uh, strategies, then I will be able to contribute, to the ongoing research and also contribute to the science policy impacts in terms of coastal management in our regions. Uh, Having been a researcher and now working with Future Earth Africa Hub here in South Africa, there is a lot of ongoing research on sustainability science and also how to engage regional stakeholders in finding solutions to climate challenges. So, yeah, I thought it would be great to be part of the fellowship and to contribute to the ongoing, endeavors to ensure that African voices are illuminated in global climate change adaptation research. Thank you.
Brilliant. Now, tell us about your research and the objectives as well as the methodology that you used in collecting your data.
First of all, begin by giving you our latest research, which I co-authored with some of the experts in the field. The research is focused on challenges and lessons learned from global coastal erosion protection strategies. So in this research, we actually looking at coastal erosion as a global threat, and you know as we understand coastal erosion has impacts on coastal communities, coastal ecosystems, the infrastructure. So we wanted to establish how global coastal management strategies are being applied in different geographical contexts to learn from those interventions, the challenges, the solutions, so that we can also establish how some of those solutions can be adapted in local contexts. In undertaking this research, it was more of an interdisciplinary research involving literature, particularly a systematic literature review. We have a picture of the entire the global coastal erosion management uh, area, and then using this literature, we were able to identify the common strategies and also the solutions. Then, after to bake this review, we applied GIS, geographical information systems, to understand or to have to visualize the locations of all those global infrastructures, and then to see the differences in north and south implementation of coastal erosion management strategies. So this is part in terms of the methodologies, because coastal management is transdisciplinary, largely transdisciplinary. We cannot rely on one method. So yeah, it was interdisciplinary approach for undertaking this research. In terms of uh, the findings, we established that numerous coastal adaptation or coastal erosion management strategies have been applied, ranging from hard structures uh, to soft structures which have been implemented, but they are more prevalent on the global north than on the global south. And we established that although we are having a trend of the increase in implementation of nature-based solutions in the global south, in Africa this has been relatively slower when compared to other regions because of the fewer number of pilots which are being implemented. But of course, now in the ocean decade, we have seen an increase in those in the implementation of nature-based solutions or soft strategies in the global south. And we also established that while there is no one solution to coastal erosion, because coastal erosion is management is actually context specific, there is also an increasing tendency to move towards adaptive management strategies and human-centered approaches in the management of coastal erosion compared to previous, uh, top-down management of implementation of management approaches in many contexts. And it is interesting to find out that communities themselves are more involved. I mean, they are being more involved, especially in the implementation of nature-based um, solutions in different contexts, in the core design of solutions, particularly with regards to mangroves, mangrove restoration, things like dune restoration. We have seen a lot of projects which are including coastal communities in identifying and also defining the appropriate coastal erosion adaptation solutions. So that is briefly the highlight on the topic and the methodologies we use, and briefly on the findings we achieved from this research. So, a systematic literature review is the type of literature review. Of course, if you're in research, you know that many types of reviews or literature reviews you can conduct, ranging from scoping reviews, from critical literature reviews. But in systematic literature review, we have a structured approach to undertaking the review, which must be, which is standardized, which follows what we call the Prisma mode, or the Prisma mode, which is actually a standard for conducting systematic literature reviews, where we define how the data was obtained, how from where, which are actually the sources, the databases from where you get that information, and then the method is the method for inclusion and exclusion of research in undertaking that review, and the approach to systematically analyze, which is thematic analysis of the findings, and then presentation of the results. So it's systematic, it's standardized approach of doing a literature review, and it can be replicated by anyone who follows the same procedure. That's why it's a systematic review.
Great. Coastal management is context specific. Where did you base your studies?
So while I was dominantly at Cape Coast, at the University of Cape Coast in Ghana. That's where I did my doctorate studies in Ghana. I'm mainly focused on I mean, I was part of the Africa Center of Excellence in Coastal Resilience project, which is ESCO, which is now at the center of I was at the Center of Coastal Management at the University of Cape Coast. So it's a regional institute on coastal management, about which brings in the West Africa coastal management area, the WACA. Yeah, but yeah, this is Africa Center of Excellence in Coastal Resilience. The studies go beyond just Ghana. My research was mostly on the investigation on coastal management strategies, which are the policies or the approaches for managing coastal erosion in Ghana. And of course, to implement that, you need to know the coastal protection infrastructure, which is the types of infrastructure that have been implemented in Ghana, and of course in West Africa. We're looking at growing fields, we're looking at revetments, we're looking at seawalls, we're looking at nature-based solutions, which comes in a variety of forms. We have, of course, bags of sand, implemented as, for example, revetment or seawalls. So this comes in a variety of forms, but in Ghana, yeah, over the past 2 decades, there has been a trend in implementation of hard structures, um, to protect communities against the increasing loss of land due to erosion. But in the past 5 years in the ocean decade, we have seen more focus on nature-based solutions, uh, particularly mangrove restoration along the coast.
Did you encounter any challenges in the course of your work?
Yes, and of course, in research, there are always challenges and there are always opportunities. Uh, in the beginning, there's always those challenges, the normal challenges of lack of data, for example, and sometimes data accuracy challenges, data reliability challenges. But thank God we now have, in this age, Earth observations, which have actually improved the way we get data on cost or coastal information in coastal areas. So we utilize a lot of Earth observation now to get some of the data which was previously almost difficult to get, and this has improved data access and reliability in terms of for researchers, and this is also increased research outputs, because if you have data, then you're able to do your research. And this research can be verified. The sources of data are also verifiable. In the past, we used to have scattered information, small, tiny dots of information. which was difficult to connect together. But now with Earth observation and satellite remote sensing, we are having much improved access to data.
Were there any surprises in the course of analysis?
Yeah, of course, not really surprises, but usually it's interesting. I mean, the way you find your you know I would say findings are always fascinating. You set out to find something and then you find some extras or find a totally different results, which are interesting because it's a finding and you want to it's a finding you would want to report on and you want to to make the public aware or you want to verify it. You want to have more research on your findings. So I wouldn't say surprises, but I mean, it's usually interesting to get new findings, even though different from expectation, but quite interesting.
So, how did your perspective change after you delved into this research? Did you have confirmed perspectives or point of views, or were they rather debunked after you analyzed everything and then got to understand the context of coastal management?
Oh, well, I would say that the findings help me to, or they help me to rather approve on existing knowledge. You always start from somewhere. You're not like going to invent the wheel. So when you get when you make a start and you have findings, you usually want to find how that is added to the existing knowledge and how that is contributing to policy. So you are researching to add knowledge to add to knowledge to add to policy. Science is for policy and policy is for science. So there's two has to be complementary. So yeah, I'm always in between there trying to see how my contribution to a research get that how that contributes to improve science policy, or how we can also be supported by the policymakers to improve our research and keep on contributing to science.
I do agree with you with how you put it. Science is for policy and policy is for science. Now, if you had 5 minutes with a policymaker, what recommendations would you give this policymaker to be able to improve the lives of the societies that are based on these coastal lines affected by climate change?
In previous policies, we used to have this top-down, rigid approach to implementation of not only cost of but climate adaptation. So communities were usually not involved. But then came the issue of justice, inclusion, equity, diversity, and that's where what I subscribe to. I subscribe that nowadays we need to be inclusive. We need human centered approaches, and the policies must shift. They must not be rigid. They must also adapt to the current trajectories where communities should define, and be part of the solutions. So policymakers need not to enforce like national agencies just used to enforce on local agencies what to do, but this has to change. This we need policymakers, we need communities, we need scientists to come together and co-design solutions. In some regions we do have coastal management plans in place where the communities already know what kind of adaptation it should be implemented in that area, and they are part of it. They have ownership. They feel they are part of the solution. Rather, when we have implementation of say a hard defense in an area which then causes some challenges to the community. The community will, maybe they will not agree with the solution, even though they may have wanted it, but if they are not part of the solution, uh, from the planning, that's where I feel we lack, where communities are not included in the planning stages of climate adaptation strategies. And secondly, I would think usually there is a political side of adaptation strategies where those who don't have political power or the political dynamics of an area determine what type of adaptation strategies should be implemented and who benefits from that. That also has to change because usually we end up having more adaptation, having solutions that are not right for the communities. And communities, they don't agree to whatever was implemented. They will say we're not part of it, we're not consulted. So yeah, we need to move away from the political, the influence of politics in adaptation, in climate adaptations. I subscribe that science should lead. We need to have scientific evidence, and then we need to have communities, and then we need to have support from the policymakers.
Absolutely. There is always a disconnect when people are taken away from the decision making, and we encounter resistance when people are left out of decision making. And this has been one of the issues that we've had when it comes to adaptation. And I'm so glad that you have also mentioned it as a researcher that people need to be involved when it comes to any decision making that is centered around them. And it's quite unfortunate that we usually adopt the process of always having secluded decision making because perhaps we believe that we are the educated ones or we are the ones in power, so the people's voices do not matter. And it's what I personally believe in, and I'm glad that you are reiterating that with your studies. um Lesson. So now that you've given us these brilliant recommendations. Is there any hope for you when you think about these people on the coastal lines when it comes to all the disaster, the vulnerability? Is there any hope at all for these people? And is there any hope with your research? What is the way forward? What is the future like with your findings and the current situation of people on the coastal lines who are encountering these disasters?
Of course, there is hope. Of course, there is hope. I mean, we people do research to contribute to policy, and then this should be implemented. I mean, included in national adaptation planning. It all comes to the policymakers. We do have, all countries now have. I think they have national adaptation planning for climate change. I think there's need to integrate that with cost adaptation planning, and you know when we have that in place, there's no disconnect. We're now like, oh, we're planning for climate change adaptation, and then we have a cost of disaster. We have an independent cost of adaptation planning. The two should be meshed together, and there should be monitoring and evaluation to keep on checking on new vulnerabilities. Like no, sea level rise is always on the increase nowadays, and we need to help the policymakers be aware of that, we have an urgent threat which is happening on the coast. We have sea level rise contributing to flooding now, constant flooding, contributing to erosion, and also have an increase in coastal storms. Even here in West Southern Africa, we have a lot of cyclones, cyclonic activities happening, and this is damaging property. So it all affects, you know, regional, economies, and, it affects, the communities. The communities are, it's not like these communities, they are part of we are not excluding them from, coastal communities are part of the entire nation, and they are not like they shouldn't be ignored. They are part of they are part of national adaptation planning, and they need to be put on the forefront of the need or the agency to provide the adaptation solutions, because that is where I think people may not prioritize coastal areas, whereas those are the areas where we are having a lot of impacts happening. So I think what I can say that adaptation funding should be aligned and channeled to the right areas where it is needed the most. And usually coastal areas, like in most cases, that's where we have marginalized people who are waiting for long, you know, left alone without a lot of infrastructure that is good. And I think we need to change that. We need to recognize that these people, uh, they need the support, all the support they need, especially in this age of severe and frequent climate impacts. Yeah, that's all I can say for now.
Listen, before we wrap up on today's episode, could you let us know how we can involve policymakers? You just mentioned that we have to, with our research, we have to try to involve policymakers. How do we reach out to them? And if you have even tried, have you encountered any challenges or any success? Just share with us briefly so we can replicate or maybe adapt to what you have to share for us.
Yeah, so yeah, research can be communicated to policymakers in many ways, and one of them is workshops, like here in Future Roads, in Future Earth Africa Hub. We do have workshops where we engage with external stakeholders, and in these forums we do have policymakers, and we also write reports together. We can facilitate workshops where we all contribute to reports, which can then lead to a national report that can be used in national adaptation planning. But yeah, workshops. I believe workshops are the best channel to engage stakeholders. We also write policy briefs. Yeah, like especially on the Atlantic and also the Indian. We occasionally write a policy brief out there on coastal and ocean governance, coastal vulnerability, addressing all those issues related to coastal resilience. Yeah, so those are some of the channels we can use to engage policymakers, and that also brings the issue of regional collaboration, solidarity, harmonization of policies, and how regionally we can contribute to coastal resilience because these challenges are transboundary. A problem in one country can spill over into the other country. For example, migration of erosion. If we build a seawall in one area, it can cause migration of erosion to downstream countries, which also affect them. So we don't just solve it for this area, because we can have migration of those challenges to other areas. So it has to be a regional effort to find the solutions and to have a longer term shoreline management plan or coastal adaptation planning. It all needs policymakers to come together in finding the solutions. Thank you.
Great. It has been an informing half-hour session with Blessing Charuka based in South Africa, who has worked in coastal management both in West Africa and the southern part of Africa. If you'd like to learn more about his works or know more about Blessing, go on the cdkn.org website where you can learn more about the Researchers Fellowship. Until next time, see you, and we continue to amplify the voices of African researchers. Bye. This podcast is part of the CDKN Africa Fellowship, working to elevate African voices in climate science, policy, and practice. Until next time, think locally led research, publish widely, and let Africa's researchers' voice echo in every local and global climate conversation.